All right, guys, welcome back to another video here on the channel. This one is going to be rather information-packed as we jump into all of the details and the cost percentage breakouts of what it took to do a DIY 80 by 60 with 16-foot tall ceiling pole building that's standing right here behind me. Now, the building isn't 100% complete. We're still waiting on a few things like the doors and ceiling insulation, but I have enough of the process complete where I have a very good handle as to what I'm gonna have invested into this building, and I'm gonna use this video to give you guys a general sense of what it took from a financial perspective to actually put this thing together. Now, I'm not typically the type of person on YouTube to sit here and talk about money figures. If anything, you'll notice if you're a subscriber and OG to the YouTube channel here, I rarely ever talk about finances. This will be one of those video exceptions where I do give and divulge some of the cost information about what it takes to erect a building like this here behind me. It's a 4,800 square foot structure. It's not small by any means, and it's a very interesting time to build a building. I'm just gonna leave it that way. The current administration's made some things kind of somewhat challenging. It's kind of increased the demand and, well, short-staffed the supply in a way, and if you know anything about the basics of microeconomics and the macro variables that play into them, we have seen some pricing go up lately. And that brought me to somewhat of a fork in the road in my decision on how I was going to approach the building when I was prepared to build it. Of course, it wouldn't have worked out any other way, where when I was finally ready to pull the trigger, it was kind of in the heat of the moment and prices seemed to be through the roof. Now, of course, things never really tend to work out in the ideal way that they should, and I had a decision to make, and that was, do I take on building a pole building like this with no prior pole building experience as a DIY project? And we're gonna get into that here in a minute. There's a lot of stuff that plays into it. So if you are considering one day building a garage for yourself, because it doesn't look that hard, well, this video is going to introduce you to most of, definitely not all, because there's probably some things that I'm gonna miss, but most of what it takes to actually get the project done. And the situation will vary by individual and by location. There's a lot of things that play into something like this. And finally, I can wrap my mind around all that's played into it because I've essentially completed all the tasks that I have to get this building to where it is today and where it's going to be in its completed state in only but a few weeks. Quick turbo spool break for the Stealth 64 and the LBZ though. We got Jake running around. He's handling some stuff today. He's actually going to pick up Lone Star as we speak, and he's gonna sound good as he pulls away. Oh my God, guys, the Stealth 64 on those LBZ sounds so orgasmic, it never gets old. Now, if you guys haven't seen, we're giving away our 21st diesel truck, and it's a brand new 2022 High Country DURTYMAX that we wrapped in a sand tan color. It's absolutely badass, and it goes by Lone Star, and it comes with $30,000 cash. So if you guys want to get entered for that, check out the first link in the description below. Grab some entries because you might be joining our list of 20+ truck and vehicle winners all across the country by the new year. Real quick, I'm gonna kind of go through the building and give you guys a general overview. For those of you that are subscribed to this YouTube channel, I'm sure it's gonna be a little bit redundant, but bear with me. It's only gonna be a quick synopsis. So from the outside looking in, we're looking at an 80-foot long by 60-foot deep stick frame building, or pole building, if you will. We've got 16-foot walls to get us at a 16-foot ceiling. As of making this video, I had mentioned there's still a few things outstanding, such as the 5 garage doors. We've got 3 14 by 14 doors up front, and then 2 10 by 10 doors, one on the east and one on the west side of the building. We do not have our ceiling insulation in yet, as I wanted to be courteous to our awesome electricians that are up there, making sure that they can get everything wired up and ready before we do our blow-in insulation. And other than that, we are pretty much done at this point in time. So as you can see, we're standing in a 90% completed pole building. We've got all of our interior metal in, all of our exterior metal is completed. The roof, the fascia, the soffing, the tin, everything has been completed. And we're walking around right now on a 6-inch concrete poured pad with rebar and some insulation mat, which I'll get into here in a minute. So what we're gonna be discussing today is essentially a completed pole building, and some of the cost components that we will be discussing will be reflective of that. But most people, when they're looking at a pole building, don't necessarily factor in a completed inside. If anything, they're just looking to complete the exterior of the building, and I'll give you guys a better sense of that today as well. Truthfully, I would have way less in this building if I just decided to put up a structure and leave the ground stone stone with no insulation in the walls and keep it kind of bare bones, if you will. But I wanted to really talk about a completed garage, something that you could jump into whether it was summer or winter time and have the creature comforts of a finished space. That's what we're shooting for here with my project specifically. I also decided to take it a step further and run a septic line and plumbing into the building, so inside of the finished space is a half bathroom and a separately climate controlled environment that we're heating with a mini split, as you can see right there. We also brought some of the creature comforts of my home into the garage to make it feel as if it was a thought out decision when that home was built, through and through, with the drywall finished walls, some nice creature comforts with the vanity and the porcelain, if you will, nice home decor and everything along those lines, and just a very nice space to feel comfortable in your home away from your home. For all intents and purposes of this video, I am gonna leave out some of the costs that are associated with doing a finished space like this, such as this barn door. I don't wanna factor that in because that might not be your style. A traditional interior door might be plenty sufficient for you if you decide to customize your building to whatever your needs might be. Getting you guys a quick little perspective from the out back portion of the building. This thing sits super tall and it is way bigger in person. Videos definitely don't do the 4,800 square foot building any justice. You kind of have to stand next to it to realize truthfully how puny you are as a human. But anyway, we've got our 16-foot high walls, and then we've got our 60-foot span trusses that are 4 foot on center. So we needed 21 trusses to complete the roof structure of this building, and we've got a total building height of 28 foot there to the ridge cap. Now that being said, all the fascia, soffit, window trim, and all the detail has been completed on the exterior. One other thing that I forgot to mention while we were inside is the actual commercial gutters that we'll be putting on this building at 6 inches with 4 to 5 inch downspouts. We did decide to plumb this building with its own independent propane system, which will help us to create a nice warm environment once we get the heater installed, which will run up along the back side of the building as we're doing a radiant tube style heater, and we're really looking forward to getting that in. It'll be a 60-foot radiant tube heater, so it'll sit 10 foot in off that wall, 10 foot in off that wall, and it will be fueled by that propane line right there. You guys can quickly see that an 80 by 60 is a very nice size. I've got my 61-inch Skag Cheetah 2 and my SVL 90 sitting in here with plenty of room for additional activities, and I will be pulling in my trucks and some of my other fleet eventually. It's just right now kind of a little bit of a war zone. We don't want to be going and picking those up with things that they might get stuck to, if you catch my drift. The finished space is right around 500 square foot, which nets us, of the 48 total in-wall square footage, about 4,300 square foot where we're standing right now. All right, guys, so we're going to start this conversation right out here. I've got actually a jotted down list that I put together before I started filming this video, just so I could keep track of everything that went into the building. And everything that went into the building actually started right out here with excavation and land clearing. But in this video, I am not here to tell you what my specific property requirements were to get to a building like that. You're gonna have to figure that out for your own. Is there excavation and fill or cutting required? Do you have equipment to do these types of things? Or some of the variables that are gonna be at play for your specific situation. In my situation, I had to do quite a bit of land clearing and land preparation because this ground was very rough, it was rocky, it had stumps, it had debris, it had stuff everywhere. Fortunately, in my instance, I have an SVL 90 Kubota, and that made the job considerably easier. Now that being said, I am going to factor the stormwater management that I had to do and the foundation prep work that I hired somebody to do into the cost, because that was the foundation necessary to get that right there behind us. But real quick, I think it's very important to note in the cost savings associated with a DIY building versus hiring somebody to do it themselves. I actually went through the exercise prior to buying this property of pricing out and having an 80 by 60 bid on by contractors back in the 2019 to 2020 timeframe, when you might say our administration helped to regulate costs, if you will. Then, not now. Just to be clear. A majority of my quotes came back around the 185 to 215 ballpark to pay somebody to be completely hands-off, to not worry about it at all and just sign some checks. Now, as I had alluded to earlier, there's a lot of things that have changed in the economy since then, and prices went up a lot, like record highs. So I had a decision to make. First one was, do I still want to do the 80 by 60, and is that the right size? I knew without a question of a doubt that was what I was looking for. So then I was at another fork in the road. Do I want to hire somebody? I went out and I bid the building again, and I had 3 competitive quotes come back from different vendors in the area, all priced around $300 to $325,000. That is a $100,000 jump from what it was 2 years prior when I was still hunting for the property that it is that I wanted to find. Now, hindsight being 2020, I'm happy I did that exercise because I had a perspective to weigh it against. And that brought me down the path that I followed, which was a DIY 80 by 60 pole building. But DIY needs to be better defined rather than just do it yourself, because I'll be the first to admit that I did not do everything myself in this project, and it wouldn't have been possible without a lot of really close friends and people in my network. And what I'm gonna chalk those up to would be your intangible and your tangible variables if you're gonna consider a DIY project before we get into this. And those are extremely important just to legitimize the viability of you even taking something like that on. So we'll start with the tangibles, and that's tools. Do you have the tools to take on a project like this? Do you have the carpentry tools? Do you have the plumbing tools? Do you have the equipment? Do you have access to the equipment or the means to make that equipment available? That's item number one. That's a tangible. That's a physical thing that you can touch. And then the intangible, and there's a few of those here. Do you have the time? Your time is essentially free at what you value your time at. Do you have the time to invest a few 100+ hours, which is what I have into this building here behind me, to actually make it happen with family, with your current job, your other responsibilities? So that's number one, is time. Number two, do you have the experience? And these are in no specific order by any means. The experience. Do you have the carpentry knowledge? Do you have the grading skills? Do you know how to excavate? Do you know how to calculate? Do you know how to estimate? Do you know how to do all of those types of things that are required to make sure that you set yourself up for success at the very beginning? What you'll find is if you've ever built anything, from a sandbox to a pole building to a house to a chicken coop, I don't care what it is, if you mess up one decision in the very beginning, it is going to haunt you the entire time, and it's not going to be done right at the end. Time, experience. Number three, you have the network. I wouldn't be able to do this without the people that contributed along the way. There were some very active and involved players that helped me, from anything from material sourcing to masonry work to electrical work to framing and hauling and excavating, and just being general resources that made themselves available to see the path of my success with this specific project through. And that I'm forever grateful for. I always say in life, the most valuable thing that you can have in your corner are people, because people make things possible, and any subscribers to this channel know that I say that all of the time. Those are three really hard things to actually wrap your hands around, but do you have the time, do you have the experience, and do you have the network? Now, if you answered yes to all of those intangible and tangible variables, tools, time, experience, and network, then I think you might be qualified to make it happen. And then you just have to, in your own mind, commit to the turbulence of the learning phase. I don't have any contracting background. I've never done anything to this scale ever in the past, so there were definitely a lot of times that I felt like I was whacking more of my head with the hammer than the actual head of the nail. And all the times with anything new, that's just the way that it'll be. So prepare yourself to be patient and trust the process, and trust yourself in your ability to vet things out. And again, you can kind of fall back on your network. You can see how they're all kind of interconnected. Now, that being said, let's get to my list. Remember what I told you that bid was back in 19 to 20? Well, that's roughly where I'm going to end up building this thing and managing this thing myself, and having specific tasks accomplished by professionals, but a majority of the upfront work done by yours truly. What I found is carpentry for me is a pretty simple process. My good friend Mike was actively involved. He ensured that we set everything up from the foundational perspective on for the path of success. And then when it came down to, let's just say, the interior tin and some of the detail electrical work, the foundation, the masonry work, things along those lines that you just can't mess up or it will haunt you for as long as the building stands, I hired those out. So I'll be right there around the 200 mark once all is said and done in this building, which I feel very good about, because from my previous bid, I know that I have in this building what this building's worth in adding the value to my property, which is a make or break decision for me, because I never buy anything at what it's not worth. That's just kind of an internal financial programming that I have since I've been a very little kid and a young business owner as a landscaper back in the day at 12 years old. That's where it all started. All right, so that was very long-winded, but it was 100% essential. So now that you got that, let's jump into this list. So you guys know roughly where I'm at. And what I did is I basically compiled a few categories of the major components of costature to this building. I'm gonna run through those, and then I'm gonna get into what the percentage of each one of those components is to that overall number of about $200,000. $200,000. Now that being said, site prep, stormwater management, and pad, the building pad, the dirt pad that had to get professionally excavated and compacted at the very bottom of that building, and this stormwater management system that we have here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. It's like the Susquehanna Valley watershed thing, and it's part of our building code and requirements out here. Somebody's ripping up the hill in a truck. Might be our installation guys, actually. I'm actually gonna go meet up with those guys now. I'll be right back. All right, so we got those guys set up, and another thing is managing timelines. Are you any good at managing projects? Because communication and scheduling and adjusting schedule is critical to making it all work, which I can't say I'm the best at, but I'm good enough to be dangerous with it. All right, so back to the excavation and the site work. We're just looking at stormwater management and the pad. That was about 16% of the total $200,000 cost. And that's what I'm gonna reference back to, okay? So about 16%. All right, so now we have our foundation. We need to actually erect the structure. The next cost component here, we've got our lumber kit, and that's all of your exterior lumber and vertical posts with headers. We've got our footings, which are essentially drilling the footers and then filling them with concrete. We've got the Midwest permacolumn brackets, which I chose to do with this specific building, so I didn't have to put my posts in the ground. Then we've got the rafters, which are all up and above that make up the roof. The actual roof tin itself, so what our exterior black roof is, and then the windows. That came out to about 37% of our total cost. All right, so now we've got our doors, and it's not just this door and that door, but it's also all of those doors right there. 5 garage doors in total, and they're not small, they're large. 3 14 by 14 doors, 2 10 by 10 doors, insulated with windows, and I've got all power garage door openers with tracks and installed, and they are painted from factory black. Those were about 11% of the cost, so a rather expensive component, all things considered, when looking at the total cost makeup of a building. Doors are on like national, global back order. I actually ordered my doors 6 months in advance, June 1st, 2021, and it won't be until November 29th, 2021 that they're installed. Nearly a 6-month lead time. And another fun fact to that for timing reference is we didn't start drilling our footers until the beginning of September. All right, now we've got our exterior tin. We didn't factor that into the 37% earlier. Our exterior tin, which would include the black wainscot on the bottom, the clay tin on the walls, clay tin on the rafters, all the fascia and soffitting, and all the J-channel detail that goes around, that was about 3% of the cost. All right, so now we're talking about the pad. As I had mentioned, it's 6-inch concrete pour. It was a lot of concrete. We're looking at nearly 80 cubic yards. I did do a reinforcement of fiberglass rebar, and there's vapor barrier under there to create a moisture barrier so moisture does not leach through the dirt foundation up into the building. That way everything stays nice and dry. Concrete was expensive. This was one of those big cost components, and I'll review that right at the end here. Concrete was about 15% of the total cost. And I know some of you guys are probably doing some math in your head right now, but I think it's important to understand what are the big hitters and what are the minor ones, because if you're looking to build a building yourself, you're gonna have to make decisions throughout the actual build makeup as to what fits your budget and maybe what would just be necessity. All right, guys, so now we're talking about the interior tin. I did a black wainscot with a galvanized wall color to somewhat match the exterior of the building, but I wanted to do something a little bit different and retro on the inside. The tin cost itself was about 9% makeup for just the walls and all the trim detail and finishing, and then about another 9% for the black painted ceiling that we did in this whole building. And you can see the black painted ceiling is pretty badass because it actually has light that reflects off of the galvanized to lighten it up a little bit. Plus we have 16 21,000 lumen lights that are going up all throughout this thing, so the black ceiling is not going to impede our lighting quality at all in this building. So pardon the background noise a little bit. Everybody's super busy and I don't want to stop them at all, but we've got a few things in terms of insulation and heating as the insulation guys are here. We did R19 bats in the wall horizontally mounted. We're doing an R30 equivalent up in the ceiling, which is all the blow-in insulation. They're preparing to do that right now with stuffing some of the soffit so insulation doesn't roll into there. And then we did a 12,000 V2 mini split there in the finished space. And all in, we're looking at about 7% total cost. That also includes the overhead radiant tube heater that isn't here yet, but will be soon. And last but not least, we're here in the utility closet looking at our 200 amp service that I ran separate from my house. That was a whole gamut in and of itself, and total all-in costs, factoring the new service, having our power company actually come out and hook up the service, all the trenching that was required with the conduit, which of course is increased because of our administration right now, and then the actual electricians themselves to come out, run all the wire, which of course is another component that's way sky high right now, and their time and materials. We're looking at another pretty big cost driver of roughly 7 to 10%. I don't quite know exactly where we're gonna be yet but that's what I'm ballparking. So to wrap all of that information up, I hope it was helpful for you guys. You're gonna ask yourself, is that what my 80 by 60 is going to cost if I go to build one, let's just say tomorrow? And I'm not the one to answer that question. I would say that it's gonna get you kind of in a ballpark close if you decide to do the exact same layout that I did. Now, I did decide to do some things that add more creature comforts to the building, like soffit lighting, for instance. Is that necessary in the makeup? No. And did I factor that in? Absolutely not. Did I talk about all of the specific lights that I bought? No. Did I talk about the specific floor that I put in the finished space? No. Did I factor in the drywall cost? No. The bigger commercial gutters, I did not factor those in as well. You guys kind of get the point. I gave you the big ticket items, the heavy hitters, if you will, that are going to impact your final bottom dollar number dramatically. And then that brings us in full circle back to the beginning of the video where I was talking to you guys about those quotes that I had gotten and what I feel best in now, having actually completed a lot of this work with these two hands that you see right here and all the people that helped, which I'm super grateful for. I know that I have in this building what this building's worth. And I think that that's a big takeaway in all of this, especially as prices continue to change in a very real-time sense. Make sure whatever you're buying is worth what you're spending. That's like the best advice that I could ever give you in anything. Now, it kind of puts you in a tough situation if you're in a rush to do something, and that's why I decided to move forward with this thing myself. But when you look at the general contractor formula, they have material plus time and materials. So they have your primary materials, for instance, lumber, which they're likely buying at a moderate wholesale discount, which they're probably somewhat marking up as a transactional fee to make money on their efforts spent to source the material for your specific project. Then they have time, so that's typically labor, right? You have people that are out on the site that get paid an hourly rate, and then the company needs to make money on top of that. You have additional materials. We're looking at things like fasteners, screws, nails. You're looking at tools, like what kind of percentage do they put as a nominal value on the value of their tools? You factor in maintenance, you factor in taxes, you have to factor in all of these sorts of things that businesses have to pay. And when you start to amortize that or multiply that out across a big project like this one, or a house, or anything else of a building, it makes a lot of sense as to why they need to make that, call it $100,000 to $125,000 to cover all of their fixed costs and still keep their business profitable. So for me, it was very worthwhile because I had those intangible and tangible assets that I could actually put into play. But the question is, do you have those to actually tackle it yourself? So this was cool, guys. I'm glad that we could have that conversation, and I hope that it was helpful. My end goal was to take all that information that I've learned and accumulated over like the last 5 to 6 months, not even factoring in pulling permits and cost to pull permits and all that other stuff, to give you guys a sense of the holistic picture from front to back, and hopefully introduce you to a few things that you might not have thought about when you're trying to plan out a project of this scale. For me, I wouldn't change a thing, and I'm really happy that I did the project. It's so fulfilling to look back at what is actually materialized as a result of my direct efforts. It's been 100% earned. And I've learned so many skills that I'll carry with me for the rest of my life based on just jumping in head first. Now, if you guys are interested in any other questions related to the building that maybe I haven't thought about quite yet, you should definitely drop them below. They might even be worthy of an entire video, so that way it helps future garage enthusiasts take on the project of their dreams themselves. Now, that being said, I gotta get back to work. We just had another load of stone dropped off. That's gonna act as my interim entrance before we hopefully do a pour sometime in the spring that will bring a 20-foot pad right off the front of the building. I also want to get some stone spread over on the left side there, do my best to cover up the mud, because the mud just needs to disappear. I've had enough of it for the next few months. So as a takeaway, there's a 2022 High Country DURTYMAX that comes with $30,000 up for grabs, and it could have your name on it if you choose to get entered for a chance to take it home. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed or you're new to the channel, thanks for stopping by and consider doing so. We'll see y'all in the next upload.